How are
Hey,
you?
Robin. Happy Tuesday. How are you?
I am doing well. What about yourself?
Doing great. Can't complain at all. Definitely in the swing of the school year and getting back to the routine and everything. And everybody's good. No complaints.
Yeah, I think we're all back in school now, from
Yep.
K-12 to higher ed, from the east to the west, north to south, all part of at least the U.S. I should say. We're all
Yeah.
back in school and getting settled into routines, and weather's starting to cool off in a few places around the country. So I think some people are starting to get a peek into fall. So it's just that time of year. Excited about chatting with our guest tonight. What's been top of mind for you though? Just going back into the new school year.
Yeah, I think not just at my own school, but as I'm talking to educators around the country, I think it's really like this renewed hope for change. I think people are those of us that are looking for it anyway are really thinking about, okay, how can I do things different? And there's kind of I think an optimism. Obviously, there's still plenty of frustration. We want to be sensitive to the teacher shortage and all those kinds of things in places around the country. But I'd like to think, generally speaking, that people are optimistic and really wanting to do things differently and move past. What are you experiencing? What are you hearing? And kind of in your role?
Yeah, I mean, even here at Microsoft, we're starting to see a shift of tides with, last year there was, I think, a lot of teacher burnout and just didn't really want to necessarily do extra training. Teachers went through so much training during the pandemic, and then they are kind of like, hey, we got what the training last year. Let us just kind of get back into the swing of things this year. We'll come back and visit this. And so we're starting to get a lot of requests for, teachers to get more professional learning and development going, and also a high demand for that to be in person. So again, I think while virtual has its benefit and you can, reach more people across multiple time zones and spaces and have things, recorded, et cetera, for use later, people miss that human touch. And so that's actually beginning to something that we're hearing more of is, can you guys come in person? Can you be here in person? It's interesting to see what's going on. And then from a higher education perspective, we're actually starting to see quite a bit of students who are pushing back on the faculty in the higher ed space, because a lot of faculty has wanted to shift back to only providing the in-person learning environment in their colleges or in their universities. And our higher education students liked the hybrid options and having the ability to go in when they need to, but also receive it virtually. So it's really interesting to see the dynamic and the shift of the student voice in the higher education space to really advocate for a hybrid learning approach.
Yeah. And what a novel concept that we might actually, are you suggesting listen to our students? Is that what I'm understanding from you?
I'm saying
that's,
they know what they want, and higher ed,
yeah,
they're actually paying to be there. So we should listen.
absolutely. Within reason, right? Within reason. We want to take some of those things with a grain of salt. But I think it's interesting too that I'm hearing a lot about not just training on the tools. You rewind a few years ago and everything was a OneNote training or a Teams training or a whatever. And it seems like there really is a shift. And I know our guest tonight, Aaron's going to love this. Just really practical application. Like, what are we doing with those tools, right? How can we help students collaborate, help teachers feel more connected? It's no longer about just the app, but what the collection of apps and tools can really do to change teaching and learning. So I certainly hope that momentum continues as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you gave a little sneak peek to our guest. His name is Aaron. Some people might know him out there. He's been a great friend, an amazing member of our community, but all around just an educator that I have so much respect for, because he challenges the status quo and he doesn't let what's always been the case stop him from doing something different. And so I really appreciate that with Aaron. It's something that I've admired in him for a long time. But with that, let's go ahead and bring on our guest for tonight.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the show, Mr. A.A. Ron.
What's going on, everybody? How you doing? Good to see you guys.
Great to see you too, my friend.
Yes. Excited to be here. Talk shop here a little bit.
That's right.
So other than our, my low-key introduction, Aaron actually is an incredibly talented educator. He's from Iowa, and he's also the creator and the host of Coffee for the Brain, which is an amazing, successful podcast and blog. He also has authored 2 books on Legos and robotics, and is currently working on a really super cool project with NASA. So I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more of that tonight. But welcome to the show, Aaron. So grateful that our audience is getting to learn from you tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. I think anytime we can have conversation, if any words shared can spark an idea or inspire one other person, then consider it a success, and that's hopefully what we can do here tonight.
Absolutely.
So Robin mentioned a bit about, your role and some of the things that you're doing, but dig in case folks are watching and don't know you as well, Aaron. Tell us a little bit about your current role and kind of the bigger picture things that you're working on, or maybe some of your personal philosophies that you're really focused on in education right now.
Yeah, so now I have a incredible job where I get to support 21 school districts on the eastern side of Iowa. It's roughly, and with the private schools, we're upwards of 40 or 50 schools, and I have a really sweet title called STEM lead, which means I can kind of mix all the magic potions the way I want to do it. But my primary areas of focus: STEM, computer science, and social studies. But where my passion lies, and I think where we want to get with some of this conversation, is creating these engaging, authentic learning experiences. So regardless of the content, just as you guys were talking about in the introduction, I think people they're hungry. I think they actually maybe have a little bit of energy to be hungry again for what are we going to do. And I think that's not just the voices of students saying that. It's also the educators at whatever level in terms of K-12 or higher, as well as whatever your role is in schools, going, it's time. We need to maybe rethink some of this. And that's not always easy. It's not always easy, but I think a lot of people are starting to realize, like, it's time. It's time. And let's pony up and make it happen.
Yeah. I think during the pandemic, one thing that we can all say is, we proved in the pandemic that education can be nimble if brought to the task.
Yes.
It can happen. And so how do we, keep that nimbleness attitude up so that we're not like, oh yeah, we can do that, but like, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, how do we get that in, keep that innovative spirit going to say, yeah, we were forced into a situation where we had to be really nimble, but how can we take that and propel into the next thing so that we can continue with those nimble motions moving forward?
Yeah, I like that. I like how you frame that up there, because I think what's happening is there's 2 things that kind of converge at the same time. One, we prove to ourselves how nimble we can be, how agile, how we had to pivot. Like, society was kind of moving at some sort of direction of that, but it was probably going to be a 10 or 15-year journey, most likely in the business world. And then, if it ever reached the education thing, and then overnight we all had to go, and we had to be nimble, and we proved that we could do it. On the flip side to that, not the flip side, but on the parallel, there was another thing happening, and we were layering 21st century tech tools on 20th century pedagogy, and it wasn't working either. Kids weren't showing up. Kids just flat out weren't doing the work. The tool wasn't necessarily being the amazing thing. And why? Because the instruction there hit a wall. Some of that was just flat out because of just virtual and online. But now that we're back in schools, we've got both things. We've proven we can do it, and we also know just putting a shiny object in front of people doesn't work either. And so now, how do we marry both of those in a proactive movement forward? And where I've been living and breathing with a lot of educators in schools right now is, how do we make things authentic? And if we have a purpose and intentionality behind the tool, behind the structures, that allows us, we know how to be nimble now. So when we bring, I'm going to call it the real world, which always seems weird because when we're in school, it is real world, but like these real world opportunities into the landscape of schools, we have to be nimble every single day. We do that now, no matter what job we do. And now, how do we weave that narrative into the fabric of this education for kids, but then also finding out ways to dive deeper into the work through the effective use of tools and different sorts of structures and systems that exist, that are out there, that, just like Microsoft has just a few tools that can help you streamline some processes so you can spend more time in the deeper levels of engagement.
So there's a ton to unpack there. And first of all, I feel like the 3 of us could talk for about 2 hours on all this stuff, because I know it's like speaking to so many of our passions. But and I want to get to the bigger picture of, kind of real world application and the current project that you're working on. But before we can get to that as educators, and we talk a lot about it on this show, through the different PLNs that we all know each other, talk for a minute about how important it is to try and not do these things in silo, in alone by yourself. How important is it to find people in your building, in your district, across your state, around the country, especially in your role, supporting these 20 plus schools? What does that PLN, that teacher network, do to kind of develop this bigger picture thinking?
Yeah, well, I think first you can't do it alone, and I think a lot of times I think about myself. You reach a point in somewhere in your journey where you're like, you know what, I'm going to do it my way because doing it with all these other people just isn't going to make it. It's just not happening. It's not moving fast enough, right? And we go and we go and we go, and maybe I'm the only one that's been that way, but I bet a lot of people can agree to at some point we just go, just let me be, let me do it. But it's not sustainable. And I think about like the MIE expert program, and you think about the longevity of that, and you think about your PLNs or the ones that are successful. It really comes down to community, and it comes down to this agency and ownership. And we talk about relationships. People always say it, but do we really like break it down in terms of what does that really mean? There's an absolutely phenomenal book out right now by Susie Weiss from the D School called Design for Belonging. If you haven't seen that, it's all about the elements of how we feel, like how to actually create experiences and spaces to allow people to feel like they belong. Part of that, I think, the two things that one that I think has stood out as long as I've been part of MIE, as well as the schools and the teachers and stuff I work with. There's a lot of things to go after, but to be succinct for time, one of the key aspects is the sharing of gifts. We all have something, and a lot of times we don't give ourselves credit to acknowledge what those are, but to share that gift, because there's nothing more rewarding than when someone receives it. Not in the sense of like, I need a pat on the back, but that energy that happens when you reach out, you ask a question, someone gives a response. And sometimes it's even maybe dissent, right? Maybe someone's going to push back, but doing it in a professional way where you don't feel personally offended. It's like, how do we unwrap this learning? That right there, when I think about MIE, that's the power. Like, people give and provide gifts of their knowledge over and over without judgment. And I think, how do we harness that back into the education landscape more? I think teachers have it, but how do you partner that with instructional coaches, with administrators, and it starts to have these more powerful conversations? Because I think everybody wants it. We don't always know how to do it. So we can leave ego at the door and provide our gifts. I think that's really where the magic happens. And in the places that have worked, that's what it's been. It's been working with people who we know we can show up and be ourselves and push and pull together to make sure the learning works and is doing what we're all after the end of the day and doing what's best for kids.
It's like, I mean, it goes really well with if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, let's go together, right?
Right.
Togetherness and also, I think about these things as you're talking, and to me, it also leads us to talk about D&I as well. Yes. If you really want to go far together, you also need to go far together with a diverse group of people, because if you just surround yourself by people who look like you, sound like you, think like you, etc., you're going to be talking in this echo chamber, right? And so I think, as we start building out these communities, whether they're school communities or, the communities you live in or student-run communities, etc., they need to represent that diverse and inclusive audience that exists inside that community as well.
Yeah. And I think, how do we go about being intentional in creating the space for that? And I use the word space a lot, and it's not just physical space, but like the mental space, the emotional space. So those voices, who maybe have not felt, heard, or seen, or feel they've been even able to have a seat at the table of conversation, can now approach that table and begin to initiate that dialogue and start to build in that sense of belonging and that community, which is so powerful moving forward, because we need those voices more than ever.
Yeah. So Aaron, both you and Scott, I mean, both working in, the K-12 education sector, have direct influence in that space. Is there, we're always looking for ideas here at Microsoft, ways that we can do things better, and you don't have to have an answer today, but just kind of curious and have you guys noodle on, are there things that we as, Microsoft education, is there anything that we could do more or do better to enable these types of environments or these communities for for all different folks, whether those be leaders, educators, students, etc. I don't know if you have any ideas now. Feel free to riff if you do. If not, we can but I'm just curious. So open for that feedback on how we can do better and enable these spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been grappling with that as well in Iowa. I know in Iowa people don't necessarily probably think of diversity, but there's like across the nation and the world, things are changing, and the economics and all the things are there's just impacts all around. And so now I think it's really sitting with what are the existing structures in place and do those still work? And I think that's just a really hard conversation that sometimes you got to have an outside voice of perspective. Like to give a prime example, is like we're looking at social studies standards, which I know is not necessarily the point of this, but we're looking at like in fifth grade in Iowa, a lot of people will study Native Americans, but they do it through the lens of like exploring geography. But the problem is it's all taught like as if these people existed like in this one time period, right? Like we're going to talk about this one time period because it's with geography, as opposed to like this is a culture, these are people, they're still here, like they thrive. Like this is not like some little isolated chapter in a textbook, which so often happens. How do we acknowledge that that's wrong? And what are we going to do? And so we're just having a conversation with the local Native American settlement here in Iowa. Like, how do we bring you to the forefront? How do we start to bring your voice? How do we create curriculum? Yeah. And not that that's a Microsoft solution, but I think it's sitting there and going, okay, we have these things that maybe we never even thought were, not, I don't think anybody did it to say to be intentional, but now that we are having more chance to have open conversation, what does that look like? And that's those things don't happen until we start bringing people at the table and you start to hear those stories. And that's how that happened.
That's where my head went, Aaron. It was perfect, almost like you were reading my mind. It's telling those stories, right? So whatever, to get to Robin's question, but just in general, the more of us that can provide space to have those stories be told, right? From all people, age and race and gender and all the interests, all those things. I think it really, I'm so thankful that I have had experiences with so many different people, because it really makes me think about life in general and just be more accepting and tolerant and intelligent and worldly from those experiences. And I think the more that we can bring those stories to the forefront and just have honest dialogue about it, I think it can do nothing other than make us all think, and be a little bit more exposed to different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Aaron, I know, you kind of bleed STEM and, done tons around robotics and Legos, but what do you think it is about, the STEM learning environment, whether folks feel like it's more innovative or, easier to maybe do something outside the box? Why do you feel, or why do you think that the teaching and learning environment, sometimes when we associate it with STEMs, seems to be so much more impactful for so many folks, whether that be students or even teachers feeling like they can push the edge of the envelope a little bit more?
Yeah, I've been grappling with this quite a bit this year, and I've shifted my mindset and my philosophy. I was just looking back at a draft of a presentation I was working on about 5-6 years ago, and the misconceptions of STEM. And I could list all these things that, and I'm looking back at it now, or looking at it today going, oh, wow, some of these things that's just nowhere where my headspace is. I think STEM has opened up a lot of doors and a lot of opportunities, and there's a ton of money and resources, and it's created a lever to get things into schools and education systems that we never thought possible. But I think we have to start to now push that further. And my fear is that STEM is going to become, if we're not careful, what like the makerspace movement was about 7-8 years ago. And then if we're not designing with intention to whatever the true goals are, the standards and how to think, not just what to think, it'll come across as more glorified recess, and we probably can all know stories where there are rooms or schools that have thousands and thousands of dollars of stuff, and someone leaves and that stuff sits on the shelf and it's lost because it hasn't created this ecosystem. So I think what the beauty of STEM has done is it has opened it up to allow all of us to be human. And there's like this unwritten permission to do all the things we know we want to do in the classroom, to explore and ask questions, to process, to tinker. What happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? So the bigger question is, why are we not expanding that? And I used to always say, like, STEM shouldn't be a room down the hall. It should be a mindset that's woven into the fabric of everything. And so how do we, I think as teachers now, coming back to what you were talking about earlier, Robin, about being nimble, and we have this rub of like, how do we think we know what didn't work and things that we proved that did work when we had to be nimble and pivot. And this authentic experience, what we're really doing is creating STEM, which is just the curiosity of being a human being. And if we need to have a label to it to get funding, great. But it's not just those 4 core subjects. It's just good friends of mine that I do all these projects with, the 2 teachers. They always say it's just how we do business. It's just how we do business. And so I think that's I don't know. It might rub some people the wrong way, but I think it's we don't have to make it more complicated than it needs to be.
We have a question that's actually coming in from somebody watching live right now. Charo is asking, what's your take on universities offering a degree in STEM? And do you see this as beneficial in ensuring deeper understanding of STEM in classroom instruction?
So, yeah, I think I've been watching this closely. We have it here in our local universities. And what I like, I like and dislike it. So I should just go on. No, these are just opinions. They're not, just because I say something doesn't mean that they're actual factual. But what I like about it is it shows me that universities, higher ed, is rethinking the system. They're rethinking how do we adapt to the needs of the K-12 system. I've been doing college tour visits with my son, who's a senior, and in one college, I won't name the name, on the whiteboard in the education room, they were still, the assignment was to create a web quest. I haven't heard that word since like 19, wow. I don't know, 90, maybe, I'll be nice, 2003.
Yeah. It's been a while.
It's been a while. But I think at the same time, it can't be so scripted where it feels like it's like a packaged curriculum either. And so I think it can be done well. I think it opens up a lot of opportunities. And I hope that people taking that in those classes, if designed correctly, start going, well, this needs to be in my methods course, and where is this and this, and that voice keeps driving the college voice. People going into the education field keep asking for more of those things. I think that's when the higher ed will listen, because at the end of the day, they need enrollment. And so I think there's a great opportunity for that to shift, to get our new wave of educators. We have a shortage. We have an issue. So we need to revamp some things to draw people in. That's just not a higher ed problem. That's a much bigger system. So I'm not putting all the blame on them, but there's an opportunity, just like K-12, for higher ed to rethink some of that.
And piggybacking on what we talked about earlier with, telling the stories of all people, I feel like that's what we need in this case too, is teachers and students and schools who are doing this work to speak up and tell the story. Because the 3 of us know, when you walk into a classroom that is founded on this STEAM or STEM kind of thinking with creativity and collaboration, I mean, there's a different, I get chills just thinking about it. There's a different kind of energy when you walk into that room versus the one where it's just all lecture or independent work. And we've certainly been in many of those classrooms as well in our career. So telling those stories, and showing the examples of what it can look like to inspire people to think outside of their box.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's it. I mean, it's hard. I mean, teachers are being asked to do 20 hours of work in an 8-hour day, but I think we also, we collectively as an education system can tell the narrative. I think we keep waiting for others to tell the narrative, and we're not liking the narrative. At least locally, the narrative in the papers isn't always glamorous about our schools, and it's offensive to the people that it's a lifestyle, and so we can complain about it, or we can start to rise up and tell that story. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to get the powerful things that are happening out there, so people start to rally around that and go, this is what I want for my kid, and this is what I want for my community. And so I think there's, hopefully through some of this, post-COVID stuff, we start to see this grassroots effort of more educators bringing their voice to the table, to in that local lens, to start the rally, to go, we are doing good stuff, and it's right here. Come see it before you put something in the press.
Yeah.
So, with all this talk about STEM, we can't let this night end without learning more about what you're doing with the mothership of STEM, which is NASA.
Yeah.
Right? So would you share a little bit with everybody what you're working on right now and what that entails? And what I understand.
Right. Yeah. So we piloted a project, or all the stuff we're talking about, we can talk about it, or we also got to do something about it. So we've got we did 2 projects. The main one here ended up using a partnership with NASA, which was just an incredible intertwine of things that happened. But the driving question was, what are the key ingredients to survive regardless of time, space, and place? The challenge that we started with was looking at what is the problem the teacher is facing. That's where we start my conversations with anybody that I'm working with. And in this case, she just wasn't real eager on the approach to how ancient Egypt was being taught. Like, how do we get kids to care about the past beyond that there's some pharaohs and pyramids, right? Like how do we make that meaningful? So long story short, we shuffled, we interwove, and we connected social studies and ELA standards. And what came of that was computer science and STEM. In Iowa, we have the universal construct. So for most people, that's like your 4 C's. And we spent a lot of time on how to think. And through that, we analyze the skill sets and the dispositions of survival, looking at the past. What did people in ancient Egypt do to survive and stay alive through all the challenges they had? To the present times, we read All 13, which is about the soccer team that got trapped in the caves, which now has a really powerful movie is out. But that was our nonfiction text. And then we segued into the future with the Artemis project that NASA has, which hopefully here by the end of the month, it will have the launch here. But the crazy thing to think about is we think about this change and being nimble. When we worked with a gentleman from NASA, Stephen Smith, who met with the kids every 2 weeks to give real-time feedback on, is it actually a problem? How do we tweak it? What exists? What doesn't exist? We learned that at this time, they were 6th graders last year, when they graduate high school, we're going to be able to see lights and infrastructure on the moon. And I think when you say that, you let that sink in, like, that's not too far away. That's my daughter's in 6th grade now. Like, all my nerdy science fiction, fantasy books and movie, like, it's a thing. Like, it's
finally going to happen.
Yeah. But what are we doing? Like, we're having a hard time trying to figure out how to be good global citizens right now, let alone thinking about space citizens. If we don't want history to repeat itself, here's an opportunity to weave in this case, STEM was our approach to create engagement. And these kids created solutions to how are we going to live on the moon, which required them to study like how we actually live here on Earth now and in the past, to be able to build those structures and solutions. And it was phenomenal. And we're running it again this year, but this year it's open to anybody. So we've got classrooms from all over the world, from South Africa all the way to here we are where I'm at in Iowa and everywhere in between. And so everyone can follow along in this journey and participate, which is really exciting.
Yeah, that's fantastic work. I mean, it's getting students to be problem solvers, creative, really give a purpose to understand the past and the history, and then the weaving in of the language arts and nonfiction there. I mean, it's all encompassing. But I think the most important thing, or thing that I love the most, was you guys are actually connecting these children during this process to an authentic audience, bringing in that NASA engineer to talk to them and let them to pitch their ideas and get some authentic feedback. It gives it the learning purpose for the students when they actually have someone to connect to, not to mention just the exposure of career professions and opportunities. And, I think we often tell our kids, you see all those little first day signs that everybody has their little kids fill out or whatever, or maybe the parents fill them out for the kid. Right. But it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we're like, I always think you're asking maybe a 5-year-old, what do they want to be when they grow up? how many career choices have they been really exposed to?
Right.
And so I think, like, how do we continue to embed more professional career opportunities inside that learning space with our students when they are very young, and not feel like they're forced into a box to be not that there's anything wrong with it, but a
No,
fireman
right.
or a policeman or a teacher, because those are the classic careers that they have exposure to.
Yeah. And
how do
go
go ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
No, you're good. Go, Scott.
I was going to say, and how do we equip them with the skills to be ready for those different jobs, right? Because all that data around 60, 70, whatever the percentage is now of jobs that don't even exist yet that our kids are going to be walking into in 10, 15 years. How do we prepare them with the skills to be ready for all those jobs and not be so focused on, the 2 or 3 or 4 that are still important, but there's so much of a world out there.
Yeah, you talked. I mean, as you bring that up, it reminds me a lot around. We had one of the things that we had to figure out as educators was this idea of, like, we called it conversational design, and I'm sure it probably maybe means something else somewhere, but that's what we came up with. So the first time we worked with NASA, we had questions and we asked and yada yada yada, and then as the kids pitched their projects the second time to get feedback, we had them prepare, right? So we had, like, you need to come up with the questions that you want to ask, and whatever. So the group would come up to Stephen through Zoom, and it would say, hey, here's what we're thinking, and he would be like, no, it's you need to rethink blah 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 blah. They didn't know what to do. Their next 9 questions were irrelevant because the answer, but they panicked, and this was an aha for us as well. Like, so they didn't know what to do, so they asked the second question, and he's like, oh, I just told you, So we had to go back, and I think part of that being nimble is for us is, like, we're the learners too. We're like, we have to teach you how to host a conversation, and we had to flip the mindset of this time with Stephen. You are the expert. This is your time with him to get what you need, not you sitting hoping that he's going to just shovel knowledge down your gullet. It's you're in charge. And so that was a whole different lesson that we had to think about as we worked with not just Stephen, but we brought PBS in to give feedback on how to tell a story. We want them to for their exhibition to the community was tell their story of learning. And so then they had to do their presentation and work with the people who create the shows for PBS. We brought in a survivalist to talk about mindsets and what he did when trapped. So we just constantly kept putting them in front of people. Going back to what you said, Robin, understand careers. And even with NASA, what we didn't realize is there's 100,000 employees, only 44 are astronauts. Like, they need artists, and they need people that, know how to tell a story, and they need social media designers. And we're just like, as educators too, it brings up another point. Do we even know the jobs that are out there? We're so consumed in our job because it's so much, right? There's not enough time to sit there and always see how much is changing around us because the stakes are so high for our kids in our classrooms. And so there's another opportunity of how do we empower the educators with that knowledge as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you design a learning experience that folds in these opportunities in the classroom, then you're learning right there with your kids, and that's okay. Yep. That's fine. You don't have to know all the things before your kids do, right? It's that mindset of, we're going to learn this together. I don't know all the answers, but let's go and learn this together.
Right.
And Aaron, as always, such a pleasure to chat with you and learn from you. You fill a special part of my bucket every time we chat. So thank you.
It's always good to see you.
But before we wanted to let you go, you down for a few lightning round questions?
Sure.
All right. Here we go. I'll start them off with kind of easy. So, what food could you not?
What was that? Sorry, I cut out there on my end, I think.
Oh, yep. I said, what food could you not live without?
I don't know if it's a food. I'll say, I gotta say coffee because it's like I think
on brand.
I think
on brand.
Yeah. I think my blood is tarnished a little brown. So I could give up food. I don't think I could give up coffee.
Yeah, well, it's all how you prepare it. You could eat coffee.
Yeah. I'll say sugar for my coffee. How about that there?
All right. If you could be anywhere in the world right now, where would you want to be?
Well, somewhere warm. I'm gonna say like Hawaii or San Diego. Maybe where Scott's at. Hang out there for a little bit.
Come on out.
All right, and I know you You love Legos, so I know you like to play, and you have a creative mindset. So what's your favorite game?
Ooh, I say card game, just because it's the one game that my family we can all agree to play, and that would be Uno. So
Classic.
we actually
That's a
do get
classic.
everybody together, it's a standard that actually like people will say yes to.
Nice.
Love
Over
it.
to you, Scott.
Yeah, a couple more here, and we'll let you go for the night. We appreciate your time so much. Who inspires you most in your life right now?
I definitely would say my wife. She's in the classroom, grinding it out every single day, and she's doing that and being a mother and being a good friend and all the things that come with that. And so I think just to be in that presence and watch it and see the journey of how tough it is to be an educator and still have the energy to do all the other things is pretty incredible.
I love that. As a husband of a principal of an elementary school, I respect that. We live a similar life, and we respect our wives just the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. And we'll get you out of here on this one. Little personal question. We have one common interest among many, Dave Matthews Band. So if you go to see Dave and you get to pick one song, you make sure they have to play. What's that song?
Ooh, Spoon.
Love it.
But only if Alanis Morissette comes and joins.
Oh, nice. Now we're getting, I like that little cameo appearance. I like that a lot.
Yeah. There we go.
That's awesome. Thank you, man. We appreciate having you. Appreciate your time so much and your friendship. And we look forward to learning from you, of course, throughout the school year and well beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And just an honor to sit here and chat with you guys and see both of you. Hopefully we can see each other face to face at some point in the future. So thanks for the opportunity here.
You bet.
I hope so. Have a great year, Aaron, and send all the loves to your family.
Yes, we'll do. I will definitely let them know.
Yeah, we're thankful that they shared you with us tonight. So
they're probably thankful for a little break, so it's all good.
We'll go back and harass them then, will you?
Hey, there you go. We'll do.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Take care.
You too. Goodness. For those who don't know Aaron, that is what every conversation with Aaron Maurer is like. Like literally, you just get into the deepest, most amazing conversations with him. I don't know if he remembers this, but there was a dinner in Seattle after, I think it was NCCE several years ago, that he and Jason Mockerman and I had. And we must have talked for a couple hours about all things education. And from that moment, I was just super inspired and appreciative of his knowledge and his passion for education.
Yeah, no words to describe Aaron. He's one of a kind, and I'm so grateful to have him in my life for sure. And so hopefully you enjoyed hearing from Aaron tonight. Definitely follow him out on social media, all the social places. He's out there everywhere. Check out his blog, his show. Amazing guy. Yeah, there you go. coffeeforthebrain.com. Check him out. Stay connected. You will learn a ton.
No doubt. Robin, wonderful conversation this week. Thanks for another great episode.
Yeah, likewise.
You bet.
Always love connecting.
No doubt. Have a great week, everybody. We'll look forward to talking to you all very soon.
Yep. Good night, everyone.
Take care.